Joining me now to discuss this a bit further, Professor Mosa Moshabela, Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He joins me now live. A very good evening to you, Prof. Thanks indeed for your time. So Ivermectin is a drug registered to be used in animals for parasites, I understand. Can it be used for humans?
Yes, greetings Griselda and to your viewers. Yes, indeed, it can be used even in South Africa. If you made a submission and you applied for a special permission to use it for humans, it will be allowed to use on the skin as a topical drug, not necessarily for ingestion. That's the extent to which in South Africa we know that it's been used for. In other countries, it is registered for use in humans, which is also why the people in other countries are able to use it even for COVID-19 under circumstances called off-label. So what we are seeing now is that the SAPRA has now given doctors the possibility of using it in humans, specifically for COVID-19, which is quite a shift in their position.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that very shortly. But how does it connect with COVID-19?
Good question. Basically, it's an anti-parasite. It is used for parasite, but COVID-19 is caused by a virus. So parasites would be things like lice and scabies. And for COVID-19, it's a virus, SARS-CoV-2. So now having a drug that's approved for use for parasites now being used for viruses, that is strange. It's not normal. So that's why the purpose is for parasites. Now we are asking them, to use it, to repurpose it for viruses. So now what it does is that it helps to prevent the virus from getting into the cells and reduces the viral load of the virus, therefore prevent severe disease and prevent hospitalization and death, therefore. So that's the evidence that is emerging at the moment, but evidence is weak.
I would have spoken to you a bit about what the regulatory body and how it has responded to this. But talk to us a bit about the shift. This was not a South Africa stance or the regulatory body stance previously. There's some sort of a nod or a go-ahead at this particular point, but very much regulated. Talk to us a bit about what the concerns were initially about this drug.
Yeah, so I think that the request to repurpose it for use in humans was generally a concern. Another concern was actually how does it work? So it was found that it's got antiviral properties in a laboratory setting. Then it was also demonstrated in some small clinical trials that it can actually reduce hospitalization. However, those studies were not necessarily strong evidence. And for that reason, you would have noticed that government basically didn't want anything to do with it. It said it is not their responsibility to decide on drugs. It is the responsibility of the regulatory authority. However, the Ministerial Advisory Committee provided guidance, and they said that there's not enough evidence to support it. Then SAPRA also took that position to say that they do not support it. I have to say, Griselda, that even with the statement that they provided today, they still do not support it. They made that very clear. They basically said that they will allow it to be used for special permission, for special application, but it will be the responsibility of the healthcare workers. It's important to note that they are not going to be liable for this.
What would then be the next step?
Yeah, so the next step here, I think that what they are calling for is for it to be used under strict monitoring. What that will allow to do is when it's prescribed, they will closely monitor the dosages that are used. They will closely monitor the symptoms, monitor the effects, and also then be able to have a full report on that. They're also asking for clinical trials. And the University of Free State is going to do a clinical trial on this. And for now, it will be up to doctors and healthcare workers to prescribe it with that permission, but they will require informed consent from patients and from family members. Just remember that when family members are under duress and distress, it's very difficult to understand what informed consent is under those circumstances. So people need to be aware that they may also not be able to hold doctors liable if something goes wrong, just because they would have given informed consent.
Is that Is that allowed, though, I guess? If this statement indeed says then there's only restricted use with this drug, and I guess there are more clinical trials that are needed, is it safe? Who then will be held liable if you have someone in an instance where something goes wrong? Because this has been used for animals only.
Yeah. No, I think that the evidence we have so far, it looks promising. Okay. It's not compelling. It's not compelling. But the danger really that lies in how much dosage. We don't know the safety of this drug in humans. We don't know what dosage needs to be used. That's why we have reports of people who have suffered adverse events, and some of them have been admitted, and some of them have suffered consequences of overdose. So those restrictions that they're putting in place are intended to counter the black market use or the illegal use or the unauthorized use, to try and say, okay, we don't support it, but if we are going to let people use it on voluntary basis, let them use it under a controlled environment that we can monitor. But we are not going to be responsible. Doctors will be the ones who are responsible. Yeah. Family members will also be liable. So in this case, I think that it is understandable that when a condition is life-threatening, there should be consideration for that. So for me, I do think that it's a fair compromise, but it is very clear that they are still saying that there's not enough evidence.
Are there any other drugs that can be used for COVID-19? Are there any others that are promising at this stage?
Griselda, that's a really important question, because it is surprising me that we are talking so much about Ivermectin. Yeah. And yet, we have previously spoken about other drugs that have been tried, and under clinical trials, they didn't work, like hydroxychloroquine. Yes. That drug was promoted a lot, but it didn't quite work. There were other drugs that were even more promising, like remdesivir, that are being used, but they still don't offer the effect that we were hoping for. In fact, the drug that is often used that with some promising results is dexamethasone. It's a steroid drug. Yes. And that drug is being supported for use. And now, if you are going to use that drug together with ivermectin, do we actually know which one is actually having an effect? But the new drug that we have heard about, Griselda, is called colchicine. That drug is currently available for human consumption in South Africa for gout. And that drug has just been demonstrated that it's got an effect. If it's used early, it can prevent, minimize hospitalization, minimize death, minimize severe disease. But I am surprised. And that study was done in a huge trial of nearly 4,500 people. But we haven't necessarily had it in the news being promoted as much as ivermectin. Yeah.
We hope we can do that. We can start here with this conversation that we're having. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Professor Mosa Moshabela, Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.